are all in this situation together. Why can't you help each other? Why can't you be there to protect each other and help each other in the common situation you have? And of course, there was some of that, but it's very difficult. And any of us who have been in situations where you're under suffering and a group of people are under suffering, you know that there are always some people who try to help each other out, but there are always some people who try to take advantage of the situation and who think the only way to survive is by putting down the other people that are with them. And that's a very sad thing. So the beloved community is something that doesn't have that. So I thought this idea of the beloved community is a very beautiful thing. And then, of course, as Muslims, we always talk about the Prophet ﷺ, peace and blessings be upon him, being the beloved of Allah. The beloved of Allah. So I said that we, instead of talking about the beloved community, when we talk about the Prophet ﷺ and his companions, what we had was the beloved's community. We had the community that was based and centered around him, that he, sallallahu alaihi wasallam, he set the tone for that in how he interacted with his companions and how he treated people. He set the tone for how his companions could treat each other. Ruhama bainahum, as the ayah said, that they were merciful and compassionate amongst each other. So the point of this talk, inshallah ta'ala, is to just share, is just to go for an hour or whatever time we have, and share some stories from that time, some incidents from the Prophet ﷺ and his companions. And many of the stories might be ones that you've heard before. Some of you have heard before. Some of the stories might be ones that you've never heard before. That would be cool. But even if you've heard the story before or the narration before, my goal and my intention is to make you think about it in a little more deep way and maybe even a new way. To think about something that you may have heard before, but think about it in a deeper way. And so I hope through that, my loftiest goal is to get you to think about whenever you hear stories or whenever you read a hadith of the Prophet ﷺ in the future, to try to think about it this way that I'm teaching you how to think about it today. Which is to not just think about what the Prophet ﷺ said and what we can learn from that, which is a great and beautiful thing, but to go deeper than that and look at who did the Prophet ﷺ say it to? What was the person who he said it to thinking at the time and feeling at the time? And why would the Prophet ﷺ say that to that person at that time? Then, why would that person remember that? And why would they then, perhaps many years later, when they're older and the Prophet ﷺ is gone, why would this be the story that they share with other people? Why would this be what they tell other people? Just like all of you, if any of you were to come and say that you knew this or that famous person, or this basketball player went to my high school, or this or that, people would probably ask you, like, what are some stories of what it was like with that person? Now, as I said, I went to DePaul and I was part of the beginning of Iman. And so now Rami Nashashibi is famous, and so people ask me, like, what was Rami Nashashibi like when he was in college and you guys were just, hanging out and stuff, and you didn't really know anything about Islam and all that stuff. So I could share those stories. And so it would be interesting to think, what do you remember and what do you share with people at that time? And if I fail to do that, which I may fail to do that, you may be for some of you, you may be like, nothing new, like I could have thought of more stuff than you thought of from that hadith. It's okay. At least, inshallah, if you go with me on this journey and spend this time with me and buy into what I'm doing, at least you'll spend an hour with the Prophet ﷺ and his companions. And what better could you do on your Saturday night than spend an hour reminiscing about the Prophet ﷺ and his companions? And hopefully you'll leave with your heart full, and you'll leave inspired to try to live your life in a different way, and inshallah to try to continue to increase this blessed community in greater ways. This is usually the hadith that I always end with, and I decided to start with it this time, okay? On this, people know this is my most favorite hadith. And so those people who used to hear me give khutbahs at DePaul or give talks, they'll probably have heard me tell this hadith many times already. But it's a hadith I love very much. And I was thinking when I was preparing for this talk, because I gave a talk a couple weeks ago at Mass Foundation, and I was thinking again, it's amazing how every time I went through them, like I knew things come to me. And really, when I was preparing for this one, the main thing I was doing was looking at all these stories and trying to maybe think of a different order to put them in, or because I only got to about half of them last time at Mass Foundation, I'm like, maybe I should put ones first that I want to get to and not run out of time. But it was amazing. Some things started to occur to me that hadn't occurred to me before. And I hope to communicate that today about how putting all these together something that you learn about the Prophet ﷺ. And I hope to communicate that to each of you today. And I'm sure if you listen and pay attention to me, I'm sure you will come up with new things that I never thought of. And so I would love if any of you would share that with me, or share your thoughts or your ideas about a particular hadith, or about how they go together, and then I could benefit from that. So the first hadith that we mention is Abu Hurairah radiallahu an. And one thing about Abu Hurairah radiallahu an, of course, he's the most prolific narrator of ahadith. So he has narrated many, many different ahadith. But what I wanted to think, one thing beautiful about Abu Hurairah radiallahu an that I was thinking about when I was thinking about this hadith for today, is that Abu Hurairah radiallahu an was very poor. Okay? And Abu Hurairah was so poor, he was with Ahl Sufa, right? He's basically in the homeless shelter that's next to the masjid of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And he would say, and this is now, remember, when he's old. And so think when Abu Hurairah radiallahu anhu is old, who is he now? He's now the greatest narrator of hadith of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. He's like the biggest sheikh there is. Everyone will go to him to talk to him. So imagine that. Like, we know that, and so much that we probably never reflect upon it, that people who were spending their time homeless and hungry later became the greatest teachers in the ummah and the greatest scholars that they had. And this was the heights that they could rise to. And so Abu Hurairah, he wasn't ashamed to tell the story of what his actual history was with the Prophet ﷺ. And he said that the other Sahaba, they used to think that I was crazy. They used to think something was wrong with me. He's telling this to his students. He's saying the other companions, a lot of them used to think something was wrong with me, because sometimes, hey, why was that? Well, sometimes I would be in the masjid and I would just be like rolling around on the floor, like groaning. And so if we came to this masjid and there was someone who had a habit of being rolling around the floor, we might think there's something going on with that person. You know, hopefully, inshallah, we wouldn't be mean. We would be concerned. We would think that this person has some kind of problem or issue. Maybe we need to get them some medical attention, or maybe we need to get them checked out. But it would just be like the other companions would be just like, that's just how Abu Hurairah is. He's just like that. We don't know why. So he said they would think something was wrong with me, but he said... Okay. But he said, he would say that the reality was, the only reason I was like that is because I was so hungry. He said the only reason I would be like that is because I was so hungry. Can you imagine? I don't know. Some of us may be able to remember a time in our life, or some of us may have to imagine a time in our life where we were that hungry. And Abu Hurairah, even though he was that hungry, he didn't want to ask for food. He didn't want to ask anyone for food, because this was not the way that the companions were. And so Abu Hurairah, he said he came up with a plan that he would stand outside the masjid, say like after Isha like this, and he would go up to one of the Sahaba and he would ask them, you know the ayah that the Imam recited? Can we talk about it a little bit? And he said, I would only hope that he would come and say, okay, come to my house, let's eat while we talk about it. That was his plan. He said, this was my plan. That's why I asked him about the ayah. He said he came, and Abu Bakr came, and Abu Bakr radiallahu anhu, he asked him, and Abu Bakr talked with him about the ayah for a little bit and then went home. He was still there, he still needed to eat. So he goes up to Umar radiallahu anhu, he says the same thing. Then he said that the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam came next. And he said when the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam saw me, he said he looked at me and he smiled at me. And we all know that the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam loved to smile at people. He loved to smile in general, but he loved to also smile at people. And there's a difference between smiling all the time and smiling at people. The most beautiful thing you can do, the thing that will make someone feel the most special, is if all of a sudden you're just walking around and then they realize that, they just saw me, and all of a sudden they start smiling. They realize that the person is smiling because they saw me. They're happy because they saw me. And so imagine if the only thing better than someone smiling just because they saw you is someone that you really love smiling just because they saw you. And the only thing, so nothing could be better than the Prophet ﷺ smiling just because he saw you. So Abu Hurairah said, the Prophet ﷺ looked at me and he smiled at me, and he saw me, and he said that he saw what was in my face, but he also saw what was in my soul. So Abu Hurairah, he's saying that, what is he saying? So he said, when he saw him, he said, Ya Abahir. He calls on, he said, Ya Abahir. He says, I'm at your service, Ya Rasulullah. He said, come with me. So they go to his house, and Abu Hurairah is probably getting a little excited now. I'm going to eat with the Prophet ﷺ. Finally, my plan worked. And the Prophet ﷺ goes home and he asks his wives, do we have any food? And one of the wives says, there's this bowl of milk that we have. So he's looking at the bowl of milk. And then the Prophet ﷺ asked her, is this bowl of milk, how did we get it? And is it charity or was it a gift from someone? And she said it was a gift from someone. And then he's looking at this bowl of milk and the Prophet ﷺ turns to him, he said, Ya Abahir. He says, I'm at your service, Ya Rasulullah. Getting ready to drink, but he says, no. He said, go to Ahl Sufa and bring them here to eat. And Abu Hurairah telling the story, radiallahu an, he says, the people of Ahl Sufa would be sometimes up to like 90 people. The people staying in the shelter. So he said, I knew if I go there and bring all those people there, there's no way that this milk is going to last for all of us. It's just a bowl of milk. And he said, I knew that I was the most hungry of anyone. So I deserved it the most, but I couldn't say anything. And the Prophet ﷺ, he sent me on a mission, so I had to go on my mission. So he went and brought the people from Ahl Sufa there, and they were in the house, and they were sitting in a circle, and the Prophet ﷺ, he said, Ya Abahir. He said, Labayk ya Rasulullah, I'm at your service, Ya Rasulullah. He said, pick up the bowl, serve the people. So Abu Hurairah radiallahu, and we know the adab of the Prophet ﷺ that he taught the people is that the person who's serving should be the last one to drink. So now he already knows the game's over, I'm going to be the last one to drink. It's going to run out, forget it. Abu Hurairah, he takes it and he's feeding each one, he's giving it to each person and they're drinking, giving back. And of course, and this is part of being around the Prophet ﷺ, the barakah of the Prophet ﷺ and the miraculous nature, he notices the milk is not disappearing. It keeps going around, but the milk is not disappearing. And Abu Hurairah is loving and the people are all drinking. And then he comes around and around and he comes to the Prophet ﷺ. And he's taking the milk to the Prophet ﷺ and the Prophet ﷺ, he says, Ya Abahir. He said, Labayk ya Rasulullah. I'm at your service, O Messenger of God. He said, it's only me and you. It's down to only me and you. He said, Sadaqt ya Rasulullah. You spoke the truth, Ya Rasulullah. Then he said, Ya Abahir. He said, take the milk and drink it. So he drank it. Then he said, drink some more. Drink some more. And then he finally said, I was too full. He said, Ya Rasulullah, I'm too full. I can't drink anymore. And then the Prophet ﷺ took the milk and he drank it himself. And of the many beautiful things in the story is the Prophet ﷺ smiling at Abu Hurairah and making him feel special. And many of us may know that one of the rare things is sometimes we may think we're a good person if we help someone out or we give them something. Or sometimes we think if we don't help them out, we at least give them a smile or we're not rude to them or something. And this is, of course, the adab of the believer. But how many of us can honestly say that when we pass that person or we come to a person that we know needs help from us, that we get happy inside and we smile at them and we're eager to help them, even when we ourselves are in need? And so Abu Hurairah, the Prophet ﷺ, and this goes back to the hadith also mentioned by Jarir ibn Abdullah, he said that ever since I became Muslim, the Prophet ﷺ never forbade me from entering the house. So every time I knocked on his house, he said, come in. And he said, ever since I became Muslim, every time I saw the Prophet ﷺ, he smiled at me. Every single time I saw him. Imagine if you had someone that you remembered back every single time they smiled at you, how much would you love that person? And how special would they make you feel if that was an important person? So the first thing is him smiling. And the second thing is Abu Hurairah saying that he saw what was in my face and he saw what was in my soul. And the first time you hear the story, you may think, oh, he saw that he was hungry. The other people didn't see that he was hungry, but he saw that he was hungry. But if all the Prophet ﷺ saw was that he was hungry, then I think he would have given him the milk at the very beginning. But instead, the Prophet ﷺ, he saw, yes, that he was hungry, but he saw more than that. He saw that in his soul, Abu Hurairah radiallahu an, he needed a purpose, he needed a mission in life. And this is something that's true of a lot of people who are in need. They don't just need, yes, they need food for that day. Yes, they need to get a place to sleep that night. But they need a lot more than that. They need a purpose and a mission in life. They need something to dedicate themselves to, something to make them want to get up in the next morning. So Abu Hurairah became one of the great scholars of Islam and one of the great helpers of the Prophet ﷺ. And here he becomes one of the servants of the Prophet ﷺ and the one who's serving everyone else. And he's on a mission. I think all of us can testify that when we feel useful and we feel we are serving the community, that it makes us feel a lot better about ourselves. and it makes us feel a lot better about whatever needs that we have. And so he saw those needs that he had. And the last thing that I always love to, that took me longer than it should have to realize about this hadith, is that the Prophet ﷺ who was the last one to drink? It wasn't Abu Hurairah, but it was the Prophet ﷺ. And we know from the way the Prophet ﷺ is, and we know his history and his life and the way that life was with him, that he was as hungry as Abu Hurairah was when he saw Abu Hurairah at the beginning. That the Prophet ﷺ was as hungry as him and he wanted the milk as much as him, but he sent both of them on a mission to feed the other people first before they took care of themselves. The second story that most of the stories will go more quickly than that, inshallah ta'ala. But in each one, I want us to take a certain lesson about the way the Prophet ﷺ dealt with a certain type of person. So, Rabi' bin Ka'b is the second companion of the Prophet ﷺ. And the Rabi' bin Ka'b, one of the things I love is because Rabi' as a young man, he came to serve the Prophet ﷺ. And we knew that many people would come to serve the Prophet ﷺ. Anas ibn Malik, other companions, people would bring their children and say, I just serve the Prophet ﷺ, meaning just hang around him, and if he needs something, like you send the kid, go do this, go do that. I have 5 children. That's one of the good things when the kids get old enough to like walk around and stuff. You don't have to go pick up things. I don't have to get my Coke. I can just tell them to bring it for me. Inshallah ta'ala. This is a sign that someone here loves me when I have Coke and I feel really at home, inshallah ta'ala. So Rabi'a, he came and wanted to serve the Prophet ﷺ. But one of the differences with Rabi'a is that most of the people would come and serve the Prophet ﷺ during the day, and then they would go home at night. And the Rabi'a radiallahu anh, he thought to himself, I don't have anywhere to go. I don't have any family. I don't have any home. And if I just stay with the Prophet ﷺ, then if he needs something during the night, I can be outside his house. He can ask me to go get something during the night for him. So I could have a special function and be especially close to the Prophet ﷺ. And so Rabi'a would say that he would sit outside the house of the Prophet ﷺ during the night and wait to see if he needed anything, and that he would fall asleep on those nights listening to the Prophet ﷺ reciting the Quran or doing dhikr or whatever he was doing inside the house. And what a beautiful way, and how much he fell in love with the Prophet ﷺ even more, to be around him during those night times when the Prophet ﷺ was alone with his Lord. And Rabi'a could be part of that. And so Rabi'a radiallahu anh, the Prophet ﷺ came to him one day. And this was a beautiful thing about the Prophet ﷺ. Whenever anyone would do a favor for him, he would pay them back. He wasn't one of these big shots that just take advantage of people doing things for him. Every time someone did something for him, he would feel like, I have to pay this person back better. I have to do something more for them. Can you imagine when all these people are racing to do things for him, how could he keep up with all that? But the Prophet ﷺ, he came and he said, Ya Rabi'a, I want to do something for you, so what do you want? Ask for whatever you want. And Rabi'a bin Ka'b radiallahu anh, in one narration, he says, give me some time to think about it. So that was smart. That was smart. When you see that opportunity, ask for a little time to think about it. Don't rush into whatever's off the top of your mind. But Rabi'a, he stopped to think about it, and then he thought, think of all the things he could ask for. I'm sure people who are young men here or young women here could think of all the things a young person without a home, without a family, without a job, what are all the things they could ask for the Prophet ﷺ to give to them? All the things that they need. But Rabi'a radiallahu anh, he started thinking that, like, which should I ask for? Should I ask for like a job? Should I ask for a house? Should I ask for like a farm or some orchard or something? Then he's finally like, what's wrong with you? This is the messenger of Allah. He's asking you for something, and you're thinking about the dunya. Don't think about the dunya. The hereafter is much more lasting. So he said, so the Prophet ﷺ came to him and he said, Ya Rabi'a, did you think of what you want? He said, yes, I want to be with you. I want to be your companion in Jannah, Ya Rasulullah. And this would be the smart companions. This is what they would think of. And one time I went through all the different companions that there's narrations of them asking this when the Prophet ﷺ asked them how to pay them back. And most of them are the people that come from Ahl Sufa. That this would be their always request, that their companionship that they felt they had with the Prophet ﷺ, they wanted that to continue into their after. And that's beautiful because it shows that they were companions with the Prophet ﷺ in this world, in this life. And it also shows that they were the people who needed dunya the most, but that's not what they were thinking of when they were around the Prophet ﷺ. So Rabi'a would ask for that. And then the Prophet ﷺ said, Ya Rabia, help me with that by increasing your sujood, by increasing your prostration. So he said, like, you're old enough now that you need to be a man. You need to start establishing your own worship and your own relationship with Allah. It's not just serving me and then listening to me. You know, like you may come to the masjid and mashallah, there may be young men who are around the masjid and that's beautiful, but you notice that they're usually running around outside and they just come to the prayer at the last minute or something like that. They're not yet to the point where they really get a lot out of the prayer itself, but they're just around. They love to be around the masjid and the brothers and stuff, and that's beautiful, but they're going to come a time in their life where they need to start finding something in the salah. We need to help them find something in the salah. And so he said, Ya Rabia, you need to help me with that by increasing in your sujood. And then, of course, the beautiful thing, and we won't be able to go into in depth, but is the Prophet ﷺ then came to Rabia and he said, Ya Rabia, don't you want to get married? So the Prophet ﷺ was thinking like, this is what maybe this is what I thought you would ask for, help getting married or something. He's like, Ya Rabia, don't you want to get married? And Rabia ibn Ka'b, he responded, he said, no, I'm good, I'm serving you, that's more important, that's what I should focus on, that would just distract me. Plus, Ya Rasulullah, I don't have a house, I don't have a job, I don't have anything, no one's going to marry me anyways, I don't have a mahr. So I'm not thinking about that, I'm just serving you. And I mentioned last time that this is something that I heard this, and I couldn't really relate to it, because I know when I converted to Islam, alhamdulillah, I was already 20 years old when I converted to Islam. So like, every single brother I knew and everything all they talked about was getting married. Like that was the only subject on their mind. So I was like, that's interesting, like this person, he would say that. But I also noticed when I became a chaplain, I would sometimes talk to brothers and they would be like, no, I'm not really thinking about that right now, I'm not ready to get married or whatever, and these are college students. And I'm like, man, people are different this age and time, it's like nowadays, like they're really focused on their careers or whatever, like they're really, and there is some truth in that people have a lot of pressure to get stable in their careers first, and so that's a mature thing to say. But it's also true, which I should have realized, that look, just because I just met them as their chaplain doesn't mean they're going to tell me like everything like right the first time I met them, They may be thinking about it, but it doesn't mean they're sharing it with me, So them saying like, I'm not thinking about that right now may not be 100% the truth. So similarly with Rabia, he says that and then he goes away, and the Prophet ﷺ comes back after a couple of days and he asks him again the same question. He said, Ya Rabia, don't you want to get married? And without really thinking about it, Rabia responds the same thing. He says, no, I'm not thinking, I can't do it. And then the Prophet ﷺ goes away, but Rabia starts thinking, man, why did he ask me again? Like he heard my answer the first time. And even the first time, the Prophet ﷺ knows that I don't have a house or a job or anything like that. Like I'm the one serving him. I'm, sleeping outside his door. He knows everything about me. But, so he must have a reason why he's asking. So he says, if he asks me again, this time I'll say yes. So he comes, and the third time he asked him, he said yes. And then the Prophet ﷺ, but he said, yes, but I don't have anything, Ya Rasul. No one's going to marry me. And then the Prophet ﷺ said to him, he said, go to such and such house and tell them that the messenger of God recommends that they marry their daughter to you. And that's a pretty amazing thing. But of course, Rabia is thinking, they're not going to believe me if I say that. Like, I don't know, they're not going to believe me if I go there and say that. They're not going to believe me. But he went to them, and he says that, and the people aren't sure. Like the parents, the people answer the door, they're not really sure about what to do about the situation. But then they hear the daughter calling, like, what's going on? They said that this man says that the messenger of God sent him and says that he recommends that we marry you to him. And she said, well, if someone's coming as a messenger from the messenger of Allah, then we should honor him and let him sit down and at least hear what he has to say. And perhaps they knew that he was someone who used to be close to the Prophet ﷺ and used to serve him. So it began to think of it in a new way. And they ended up getting married. And we can't include everything in the story, but the Prophet ﷺ, the thing I wanted to end with is the Prophet ﷺ, they said that he helped him go to his tribe and get some meat and get some mahr and get everything together. And then he, ﷺ, he attended the wedding, the nikah. And this is a beautiful thing. What could be a more blessed wedding than one arranged by the Prophet ﷺ, and the Prophet ﷺ is in attendance. And this was a beautiful thing about the Prophet ﷺ, that we know that the adab of a Muslim and the sunnah is to accept invitations. But the Prophet ﷺ would make sure to accept invitations, not just from the the chieftains and the elite people, but he would accept invitations from the slaves and the servants and the women and everyone who would invite him. The Prophet ﷺ would come and respond to that invitation. And they said he would go to the homes of the Ansar, and even the Ansar that were very modest, and he would go and eat. And a beautiful statement that I always love in Ash-Shama'il of Imam at-Tirmidhi, the Prophet ﷺ would say, it was said about the Prophet ﷺ that he would never criticize food, and he would never overpraise food. Like he wasn't a foodie like we are, he wouldn't go on and take pictures of his food for Snapchat and stuff, or Instagram or whatever you guys do nowadays. But he wouldn't do that, the Prophet ﷺ, because that's putting too much on the food. Like he would say, alhamdulillah, he would be grateful for the food, and he would never criticize. But they said the one exception that where he would praise food is if he wanted to honor the guest of someone who invited him. So when he's coming to these poor Ansari homes, that's when he would praise the food a lot and say how much he loved the food that they gave him. And then the Prophet ﷺ, before he would go, he would always go to a corner of their home and he would make salah in their home and establish that as a blessed place in their home where they could then pray. And that was how the Prophet ﷺ would honor each of them. And so they could all come, and anytime they had a guest, they could say, this is where the Prophet ﷺ prayed in our house after he ate our food. And don't you remember how much he loved our food? Don't you remember the Prophet ﷺ saying how much he loved our food? So the Prophet ﷺ would do that. And he would also say, and one narration that I always used to hear and I didn't really understand it, and I still don't fully understand it, and I don't think any of us can, because we don't always know how things translate from our time back to that time. Like we know human beings have always had mental illness. They've always had like disabilities and stuff like that, but they didn't think of them maybe the same way that we do. Like we don't know how they thought of them at that time. But there's an interesting narration where they said a woman used to come to the Prophet ﷺ who had either some kind of mental illness or some kind of disability. So people would know that about her, and she would come to the Prophet ﷺ and ask her something. And they said that he would always say to her, he said, Ya so-and-so, take me wherever you want to, and I'll sit with you and take care of whatever need that you have. And I won't leave until you're done with whatever you need to say to me. And we could imagine in our time, someone coming, and inshallah ta'ala we would treat them with respect, but can we imagine really giving them whatever time they needed and really listening to whatever they had to say, even if we didn't fully understand what they were doing. The other beautiful thing about it is that the Prophet ﷺ would say, direct me to wherever you want to go. And also they would say that the Prophet ﷺ, any young girl in Medina could take him by the hand and direct him to where she wanted him to go. And one of the beautiful things about this is you start to think that these people could walk through the streets of Medina with the Prophet ﷺ. And they could see, everyone could see them walking with the Prophet ﷺ. Imagine any of us, we would love to have, say there was some important person here, like say Sheikh Omar Suleiman or someone was here. Wouldn't we love to say that, oh yeah, I saw Abdul-Malik walking with Sheikh Omar Suleiman, just walking down the street talking or whatever. And of course the Prophet ﷺ is at a higher level than Sheikh Omar Suleiman. May Allah be pleased with him. May Allah preserve Sheikh Omar. So the Prophet ﷺ, this is a beautiful way that he would honor people by accepting their requests and being close to them and going to their weddings and going to their special events and everything like that. I wanted to mention something about, I'm going to go quickly through a few short narrations, but they show how the Prophet ﷺ interacted with different groups. So starting with, how did the Prophet ﷺ interact with people who were disbelievers? Like people who were around him that didn't believe. And not only that, like we know there's people who just don't believe, and we'll see both categories. There's some people who are just not Muslims, but they're nice to us. Like they're cool with us, they like to see us, they hang out with us. And then there's people who are non-Muslims and they actually hate Islam and they speak against Islam and all these kind of things. And the Prophet ﷺ had to interact with both kinds of people. So with the first kind of people, the people who speak against Islam, the interesting thing which we may or may not have experience with is that for the Prophet ﷺ, the people who were the biggest enemies of Islam were who? We're talking about, this is in Mecca now. The biggest enemies of Islam in Mecca were the Prophet ﷺ's own family members. Okay, especially like his uncles and stuff. So we know his direct household was very close with him. And of course Abu Talib didn't accept Islam, but many of the other ones accepted Islam, but Abu Talib chose to protect him. So his closest people that like lived with him, they accepted Islam. But his close family that didn't exactly live with him, like his uncles and stuff, they were the ones who were the most against him. Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam. And so these Quraysh, they would come to the Prophet ﷺ and they would say, and what you'll find about these people who are hostile to Islam and who is that they will say stuff to kind of mock the religion, and they will say stuff to mock. So they would say, Ya Rasulullah, you see the Mount of Uhud over there? Turn it to gold and we'll become Muslim. Go ahead, turn it to gold and we'll become Muslim for you. Why don't you do that? Like tricks and stuff. But the interesting thing is to think, I don't know, how would we react to that? The Prophet ﷺ, the way he reacted to that is that he said, really? Are you being serious? Because the Prophet ﷺ wanted them to become Muslim more than anything else. So he saw it as a possible opening. He saw it as a possible chance. And the Prophet ﷺ, he spoke with Allah. He got revelation. He didn't have any doubt that Allah could turn it into gold. Like, he wasn't worried about that. That would be the easiest thing in the world. So he says, really? You're telling me really if Allah just turns this to gold, then you'll become Muslim? And they said, yes. So the Prophet ﷺ made dua, oh Allah, turn this to gold. Turn Mount Uhud to gold. Then it was said that someone came to the Prophet ﷺ. I'm in big trouble with time. Okay. Allah. Okay. This came to the Prophet ﷺ, and Angel Jibreel asked Rasulullah, said, Allah said he'll turn it to gold, but he said, if the people don't accept after that, if they don't become Muslim after that, then they will be faced with a punishment like has never been hit to any people before. Because they're mocking you first, and then they told you they will, and if they still don't become Muslim after we turn it to gold right in front of their eyes, then that's it, we're just going to punish them. Or we could not do that and leave open the door of Tawbah and Rahmah for them. And the Prophet ﷺ immediately, he said, no, leave open the door of Tawbah and Rahmah. So this is how the Prophet ﷺ was with his biggest enemies, that he wanted good for them, and he wanted to leave open the door of Tawbah and Rahmah. Sometimes in da'wah we have the opposite attitude. Even people who do da'wah, not the people who just say, forget those people, those kuffar, we don't want anything to do with them. But some people who actually do da'wah, they have a weird attitude, and this sometimes they even have with Muslims. Like, okay, I told them the truth, like I established the proof against them, so on the Day of Judgment, I told them. And then be somehow happy that they're going to get punished and you're going to get off because you told them the truth in your harsh whatever way that you told them. But the Prophet ﷺ was not like that at all. The Prophet ﷺ didn't want to establish proof against anyone. He wanted to have everyone accept Islam, and those who didn't, he wanted to leave open the door of Tawbah and Rahmah for them. Now, how did the Prophet ﷺ deal with non-Muslims who were nice? We'll relate quickly the story of Dihya Kalbi. And I love the story of Dihya Kalbi because, of course, Dihya Kalbi is most famous for being the one that the angel Jibreel would come and he would look, like people would say, like, oh, I just saw Dihya over there. And the Prophet ﷺ would be like, no, that was Jibreel alayhi salam. So he would come, and there's different ways that's narrated. It's usually said that he would come in a form that kind of looked like Dihya Kalbi. Sometimes people directly say he came as like Dihya Kalbi. But other times, the Prophet ﷺ, he once said that when he was going in the Isra wal Miraj, he said he saw, when he saw Jibreel, or one time when he saw Jibreel alayhi salam, he said he saw Jibreel and he looked just like Dihya Kalbi. So even when he was seeing Jibreel, he said he looked like that. So, and you know, angels, of course, can take different shapes and forms at different times. So, of course, he had his angelic form with the wings and stuff, but he also, when he looked like a human being, he looked like Dihya al-Kalbi. And of course, we know from Surah Yusuf that angels are the most beautiful of creation. So, well, I don't know. I mean, the Prophet ﷺ is the most beautiful creation, but angels are a very beautiful creation. So if you say someone looks like an angel, then that's like a highest compliment of their beauty. Now, the Dihya Kalbi, so Dihya Kalbi must have been a very handsome man, mashallah. And he was very like cool. I picture him as like a very cool, suave man that everyone wanted to be like. Because Dihya, the things we know about him later, the Prophet ﷺ made him like an ambassador. Like he made him the ambassador of the Muslims. You know the beginning of the message? I don't know if this generation knows the message anymore, but being the message where the horses, the riders are going out, one of them was Dihya al-Kalbi, okay? So they're going out to tell the people about it. So he was one of the ambassadors that would go to place. So the Prophet ﷺ would like to have those people be people who would make an amazing impression that people would say. And this is after he became Muslim. But before he became Muslim, Dihya would come visit the Prophet ﷺ, and he wasn't Muslim, but every time he visited him, he would give him a gift. He would bring a gift for the Prophet ﷺ because this is how he was, this is how he rolled. He would give him a gift. And And the Prophet ﷺ, every time he would accept the gift, because we know the sunnah is to accept gifts. So he would accept the gift from this non-Muslim, but every time he would say, and this also shows the relationship that they had. Because you have to know the relationship you have with people, that certain things you can say that you would be improper to say in a different kind of relationship. So because they were close and he knew they had love for each other, he could be very honest with him. And he would say, Ya Dihya, you know, thank you for the gift, but you know the gift that I really want from you is you accepting Islam. He would tell them this every time, and he would still keep visiting him and doing this. So that shows you the relationship they had. And of course, the funny story that we like to end on is that one time the Prophet ﷺ said Jibreel did come, and Jibreel was coming to visit the Prophet ﷺ, and all of a sudden Al-Hassan wal Hussein, the Prophet's grandchildren, were like jumping on Jibreel and trying to grab something from him. And the Prophet ﷺ got worried and said, Yeah, Jibreel, I'm sorry about that. It's not that they have bad manners or whatever, but they think you're Dihya al-Kalbi, and every time he comes, he has gifts for them in his pockets. So when they see him, they just want to take that from you. So this is what he did. But Dihya, we see how the Prophet ﷺ treated someone who was not Muslim, but he was nice to the Muslims, that the Prophet ﷺ honored his niceness and always made him feel comfortable, but at the same time, he wanted deep in his heart for him to accept Islam, and he knew how to let him know that in a way that was special and not pressuring. I wanted to mention how did the Prophet ﷺ, now one definition of community that I really love that I came across is that someone said the definition of a community is a place that when you go there, they're happy to see you, and if you're not there, they miss you. Okay? And now, I don't know how many of us have communities like that. But there's a lot of us who worry and who fear in this time and age that we don't have any place like that. That there's nowhere that we go that people are happy to see us, and that they'll miss us if we don't show up. And this is something that's very important for people to have that place where they can go and feel special and feel important. And so, one of the things about the Prophet ﷺ's beloved community is that it was a community in that sense of the word, that people felt special. And they said that the normal habit of the Prophet ﷺ would be if he didn't see one of the companions for 3 days. And one of the beautiful wisdoms of establishing the salah in the masjid, especially for the men, is that the Prophet ﷺ would see everyone on a regular basis. So if he didn't see someone for 3 days, that would be a big deal. If the Prophet ﷺ didn't see someone for 3 days, he would know something was going on. So they said if it had been 3 days, he would really start to miss the person, and he would start to ask what was going on. If they said he was traveling or he was away from town, then the Prophet ﷺ would make dua for him. And if he was still in town, the Prophet ﷺ would go to see him. And if they said that he was sick, the Prophet ﷺ would go to visit him. And this is how the Prophet ﷺ would treat the community. Now we know the famous narration where Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, one time the Prophet ﷺ, he noticed that Thabit ibn Qais was missing. So he asked the companion, what happened to Thabit ibn Qais? And they said, we don't know. Let's go to his house and find out. I'll go find out for you. And so they went to the house of Thabit ibn Qais, and they asked him, the Prophet ﷺ is missing you. He's asking about you. What's going on? He said, I'm ruined. He said, you know, Allah revealed in Surah Al-Hujra the verse, don't raise your voice above the voice of the Prophet ﷺ, that if you do that, all of your good deeds will go to waste. He said, the verse is about me. Thabit ibn Qais, he said the verse is about me, because Thabit ibn Qais, radiallahu an, he was, I don't know if you have it in your circle of like friends or whatever, but he was the one who, they would always say, that's that loud brother, you know? The one that's always talking loud and saying, like he was known as the loud person. So when he saw Allah revealed this verse, he said that Allah is talking about me and all my deeds went to waste. And he said, I can't leave my house. I don't want to face the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. So they said, they came back to the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and they said, this is what he said. They say that he thinks that this verse is about him, and all his deeds have been destroyed, and he's going to the fire. And the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam said, go to him and tell him that you are not a person of, he's not a person of the fire, but rather he's a person of Jannah. And this is the Prophet ﷺ would pay attention to what people said. You know, and sometimes we don't want to play into people's habits of like talking bad about themselves or talking down, so we might ignore it or whatever, or we try to deal with it. But the Prophet ﷺ would take very seriously if someone said something like that, and the Prophet ﷺ would be quick to address it. He wouldn't just leave it hanging out there. So the Prophet ﷺ, because when people start to think that way about themselves, that they can't get out of that. You can't get out of that if you think you're truly a person destined for the fire. And no Muslim should think like that. Because none of us, as long as you're breathing and walking around, Tawbah is there for you. There's no problem. There's nothing between you and Tawbah. As I said to the person who killed 99 people. So the Prophet, killed 100 actually by that time. So this is a very important thing. One other beautiful thing that I wanted to just mention, Ubay ibn Ka'b radiallahu anh. We all know Ubay ibn Ka'b, who is one of the companions who was known for reciting the Quran and for being an expert on the Quran. And the Prophet ﷺ would say, if any of you has a question about the Quran, ask Ubay ibn Ka'b radiallahu anh. So one time he came to Ubay and the Prophet ﷺ said, Ya Ubay, Allah asked me to recite this surah to you so you can treat it to the people. And Ubay, he didn't just let that go. He stopped and he said, Ya Rasulullah, you said Allah asked you to recite this to me? He said, did Allah mention me by my name? Did Allah say, recite that to Ubay ibn Ka'b? And he said, yes, He mentioned you by your name. And the beautiful thing about that when you reflect upon it is how beautiful that made Ubay radiallahu anhu feel. But we all must know, and even if we forget sometimes, that Allah knows all of our names. And Allah knows whatever is going on with us and whatever we're suffering. And Allah knows more about us than our closest friend. Because something or some dream or hope or worry that we never shared with anyone else, that we never even spoke aloud, Allah knows about it. And Allah is there watching us. And Allah sees every triumph that we have and every good deed that we do. And Allah sees every hardship that we have. And even when there's something that we do that other people think is just easy, but we know how hard it is for us, Allah knows how hard it is for us. And Allah loves it so much when we do those things that are hard for us. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is rooting for us. He's like that friend. I don't know if you have friends like that. I hope you do. But Allah is that friend who, like they said, that if you take one step towards them, they take 2 steps towards you. If you come to them walking, they come running towards you. If you had a human friend like that, how happy would you feel? Now you have Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, the Lord of all the worlds, that is just waiting and knowing everything about you and just waiting for you to do something good so He could reward you. And He's waiting to make your path easy if you just start on the path of goodness and make that intention. And if Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, the Lord of all the worlds, wants to make something easy for you, no one can make it difficult for you. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala knows each of our names and He knows everything that is going on with us. One other beautiful thing, the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, we know that his habit would be not just that he would say yes if people ask him for something, but the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam would say yes even if he didn't have anything. So someone would say, Ya Rasulullah, I need to get some clothes or I need to get some food or something. And the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam literally had nothing himself. He had nothing to give to them. What would he do? He would say, go buy yourself some new clothes and tell them I'll pay them back later when I get some money. He would take loans and he let people take loans in his name to get something they need. And one time he did this with someone, and Umar radiallahu an, he said, Ya Rasulullah, he said, Allah doesn't make you give what you don't even have. Like, you don't have to give, you can just be nice to them, but you don't have to give to someone if you don't have anything yourself. And they said that when he said that, when Umar radiallahu an, and we love Umar, when Umar said that, the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam began, his face got really sad and he got upset. And then one of the Ansar who heard this going on, he jumped up and he said, Ya Rasulullah, keep giving and don't ever fear that the Lord of the throne will stop replenishing for you, will stop paying it on your behalf. And the Prophet ﷺ got really happy. And he said, this is what I was sent with. This is what I was sent with. One hadith that you may have heard that I really love, and I don't even know if I can describe why I love it so much, and maybe someone can help me with that, is the hadith Abu Dhar, because I love Abu Dhar radiallahu anhu a lot. I love Abu Dhar a lot because he has many beautiful characteristics. And Abu Dhar is one of those guys, we know he's from Banu Ghafar and it's a tribe, like a gangster tribe, and he's doing all this stuff. But Abu Dhar became such a person focused on the deen and such a person who didn't care about this dunya. And he was that guy who was actually, we have to keep in our mind, he was actually one of those guys who would be annoying to be around. Okay, especially like later on. Like, I don't know what term people would use for him, but later on, and the Prophet ﷺ knew that about him. And the Prophet ﷺ used to advise him. And first he would say, Abu Dhar, don't ever let them make you the leader of anything. Don't ever let them put you the leader of anything. Because he knew he would be too hard on the people. Like Abu Dhar would take a standard that was impossible. Because Abu Dhar saw the Prophet ﷺ, and he saw how the Prophet ﷺ would not hold wealth. Like if he got wealth, he would make sure he spent it within a couple of days. So Abu Dhar would not just say, oh, mashallah, the Prophet ﷺ is so generous. He would say, we're Muslims, this is what we're supposed to do. And if people were holding wealth for more than a couple of days, he would go to them and say, what's the matter with you? You've gone against the way of the Prophet ﷺ. Stop holding your wealth. Stop doing that. So that would be an annoying person to be around, right? As much as they loved Abu Dhar, it would be hard to be around that person. But the narration that I really love is when Abu Dhar, and you see the beginning of the narration, I don't have it handy, but you see the beginning of the narration, it says that Abu Dhar comes to the Prophet ﷺ, and he's like sleeping, he's resting with like a mantle, a white mantle, like a cover over him. And he said that he's resting, and Abu Dhar is just sitting with him and waiting for him to wake up. And then he said the Prophet ﷺ woke up. And it doesn't really say how this relates to the Prophet waking up, but I don't know if it's something from his dream or something in Revelation or something. He turns to Abu Dhar and he says, Ya Abu Dhar, he said, anyone who says La ilaha illallah will go to Jannah. He says, anyone who says La ilaha illallah will go to Jannah. He says this to Abu Dhar. And think about it. Again, this is what I'm telling you. Think what this means to say that to Abu Dhar, who has these high standards, who think, he's one of those guys who thinks everyone's a sellout and everyone is, like the Muslims are not what they used to be and nobody's worth anything. He's telling him, Abu Dhar, everyone who says La ilaha illallah will go to Jannah. And Abu Dhar, he doesn't, even though he loves the Prophet ﷺ, he's not ready to hear that. So he says, Ya Rasulullah, what about the people who steal and commit adultery? Even the people who steal and commit adultery? And the Prophet ﷺ says, even the people who steal and commit adultery. And Abu Dhar says, no, I'm saying the people who steal, I'm saying they steal things from people and they commit zina. We're talking about zina, we're supposed to be Muslims here. I'm talking about those people. He said, even the people who steal and commit zina, Abu Dhar. He has a third time. He said, Ya Rasulullah, I don't think you heard me. I said the people, there's people out here, I don't know if you know this, there's people out here who are stealing from people and committing zina. They come to the masjid, you think they're all holy and all this. That's what they're doing out there. He said, even those people will go to Jannah. Even the people steal. Then he finally said a fourth time. He said, even the people, he said, Rasulullah, I just want to have this straight when I leave. You're telling me that people who steal and commit adultery, even if they say La ilaha illallah, they will go to Jannah. And the Prophet ﷺ said, even the people who steal and commit adultery, and then he said, even if Abu Dhar doesn't like it. Even if Abu Dhar doesn't like it that they go to Jannah, they will still go to Jannah. And so beautiful, because of course, I could just think about that forever, what was in Abu Dhar's mind. And we all could recognize, maybe some of us could recognize being that Abu Dhar at different stages in our life. And there's a lot of beauty in that. Abu Dhar radiallahu anhu it's beautiful to have him as part of the ummah. And we need to have people like that. Of course, there's a way to do it, inshallah, with wisdom and stuff, but we need to have people like that. I hope we never have an ummah where people are watching people commit sin and watching people take advantage of people and watching people oppress people and you don't say anything about it, you don't feel bad about it. Of course you should feel that. But he said that they will go to Jannah even if Abu Dhar doesn't like it. And of course Abu Dhar will love for them to go to Jannah in the end. Abu Dhar will love to them. But he went away, the hadith narration says that he went away muttering, even if Abu Dhar doesn't like it. Even if Abu Dhar doesn't like it. And I always think, like, how was he saying that? I'm not sure how he was saying that. Like, when I first heard, I'm always like, he was saying that, like, he really does, like, I really do want them to go to Jannah. But just that he still couldn't wrap his head around what the Prophet ﷺ said. I have to say this one. We have 5 minutes left, inshallah. Because this is another one about how the Prophet ﷺ dealt with sinners. And the Prophet ﷺ, in this narration, a man came, and this is reported by Anas radiallahu anhu, I believe. A man came to the Prophet ﷺ, and he said, so Anas is like a boy, and he's around. He sees a man come to the Prophet ﷺ. He said, Ya Rasulullah. He said, a person came. He doesn't say who it is. Maybe he didn't know who it was, or maybe there's another reason when we see what happens why he didn't want to say who it was. But he said a person came to the Prophet ﷺ. He said, Ya Rasulullah, I committed one of the had crimes. You have to punish me. And then the Prophet ﷺ didn't say anything. And that was something I didn't have a chance to point out in some of these, like the Rabi'a and some other. One of the amazing things in the hadith that I really love is when the Prophet ﷺ is silent. When someone says something and the Prophet ﷺ is silent. I love to think about why he's silent and what the person was thinking about when the Prophet ﷺ was silent. So he came and the Prophet ﷺ was silent. And then the time for prayer came. And they all get up and they line up and pray. And the person prays with them. And then imagine what the person is thinking while he's praying. He's like, okay, imagine how much courage and what thought process the person went up to decide, I need to confess this to the Prophet ﷺ, even though I'm going to get like a physical punishment, everyone's going to know I'm a huge sinner and all this. But he wanted to do it. And he wanted to confess. And he did it, and the Prophet ﷺ didn't say anything. And then they're praying. Can you imagine the prayer that he had? And what was going through his mind? And what is he thinking? What do I do now? And how close to Allah and how needy to Allah the person must have been. And then the prayer finishes, and the Prophet ﷺ is sitting, and the person comes up to the Prophet again and says, Ya Rasulullah, I committed a had crime. You have to judge me according to the book, according to the kitab. And the Prophet ﷺ, he said, didn't you just pray with us? Didn't you just pray with us? He said, yes, I did. He said, Allah has forgiven your sin. Allah has forgiven your sin. And this tells you something beautiful about the power of salah, but I think especially if you understand what kind of salah that person made, what kind of tawbah that person made, and the fact that they were still willing to go to the Prophet ﷺ and say, because their tawbah was so great, but they wanted that, but he said, Allah has forgiven your sin because of the salah. And because of the tawbah that you made. Okay, we're going to end with the Prophet ﷺ. One of the beautiful things that the narrations about the Prophet ﷺ, when they say that he would, like when they would go and the non-Muslims would see how the companions were with the Prophet ﷺ, we know they would say like, man, you won't believe, like they would like chase after each other to get the water from his wudu, right? They would try to get the barakah from anything about him. They would count how many like white hairs he had in his beard. They would just sit and look at him and just count things like that. They just loved him so much. And the Prophet ﷺ, so they would try to be getting barakah from everything about him, from his wudu water, from everything. But the Prophet ﷺ, it's narrated in a beautiful narration that by Ibn Abbas radiallahu anhu, he said that the Prophet ﷺ went to the well to get some water. And they said, Ya Rasulullah, this well, he said, give me some of the water. He said, this well, all the people just take their hands out and drink from it. You don't want that. We have some in the house waiting for you special. The Prophet ﷺ said, I don't need that. I want to drink from what the people drink from. I want to drink from what the people drink from. And this was the humility of the Prophet ﷺ. But it goes beyond humility even. Because in another narration, it is said by Ibn Umar that the Prophet ﷺ, he used to ask them specifically to go and get the water that used to be from the people making wudu and bring it to him, and he used to drink it. Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam. He used to take it and say, I want to seek the barakah of the hands of the Muslims. And this is such a beautiful thing, because to me, like what you realize, just like in the first story, you realize that the Prophet ﷺ was hungrier than Abu Hurairah. You realize that as much as they sought the barakah of the Prophet ﷺ saw that in the common people, in the people no one else cared about. He sought their barakah. We won't have time to tell the story that I really wanted to share about some of the companions of the Prophet ﷺ that they revealed the ayah in Surah Al-Kahf about. And Allah commanded the Prophet ﷺ to stay with them regardless of what the people thought, and to be close to them. And the Prophet ﷺ would love them, and he loved the common Muslims. So we will end with the hadith that I usually start with, since I started with the one I usually end with. So the Prophet ﷺ, because I think it sums up the relationship between the companions. The Prophet ﷺ, They said that when Ubadah ibn as-Samit, he narrates that when they used to go on journeys or when they used to go traveling, that the Prophet ﷺ would camp in the middle and everyone would camp around him. So it would be like a honeycomb around the Prophet ﷺ, because of course everyone wanted to be as close to him as possible. Everyone wanted to protect him. So wherever he go, people would just wait to see where he goes, and then they would go as close to him as they could. Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam. So Ubadah says that the Prophet ﷺ did this. They camped. Then one morning they got up and they looked in the tent and they realized the Prophet ﷺ wasn't there. And so they were looking and looking, and all of a sudden, you know how at first you're just looking and like, oh, he must be here or there, but then it gets longer and longer. And then all of a sudden you really start panicking, and like something bad is going on. I don't know, I've had this with my child before, like you're in the park and then all of a sudden, oh, where are they, where are they, where are they? And then you start like screaming and running everywhere because you feel like you have nightmares that your child just like disappeared. Alhamdulillah, she didn't. She was with her big sister. But the Prophet ﷺ disappeared. So they're looking for the Prophet ﷺ. And one of the beautiful things, again, think what's in their mind. And they mentioned this in the narration. Ubadah said that we began to panic, and then when the Prophet ﷺ came, when we finally saw the Prophet ﷺ, we started yelling, Takbir, Takbir, Allahu Akbar, and they started running to the Prophet ﷺ. And they told him, they said, Ya Rasulullah, the reason we were so upset, the reason we were so worried is that, not that we thought something happened to you, like you got killed or hurt or something, says that we began to worry that Allah had chosen different companions for you than us. That Allah had looked at us and said, like, the Prophet, he's the last Prophet, he needs different companions. We're not up to the job. We're not enough to carry this and establish this. We can't be the beloved's community. We're not up to that level. That's what we worried about. That's what the Sahaba worried about. And the Prophet ﷺ, again, pay attention, he didn't just let that go, oh, yeah. He said, the Prophet ﷺ, he stopped and he looked them in the eyes and he said, La, bal antum ashabi fi dunya wal akhirah. No, you are my companions in this world and the hereafter. That Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So this is the thing that they wanted the most, was the companionship of the Prophet ﷺ in the hereafter. And he told them that they would be his companions in this world and in the hereafter. And then he said, he didn't stop there. He said, the reason I was gone is because Allah woke me up in the middle of the night. And Allah brought me out. And then Allah said, don't you know that every prophet has one special dua? Of course, all of us can make dua. And this is one of the beautiful things about Islam, that you can make dua at any time, but there's still special times when you make dua. And so the Prophet ﷺ, he can make dua anytime, but this Allah is telling him, you have one special dua. One that's higher than all the others for every prophet. And he said, and I told him that my one special dua is shifa, intercession for the Muslims on Yawm al-Qiyamah. That's what I want. And then Abu Bakr, he says, Ya Rasulullah, what do you mean? What does this mean exactly? Shifa, intercession for the Muslims on Yawm al-Qiyamah. He said, when the day of judgment comes, Allah will come to me and I'll tell him, remember when you said I had one special dua? And I said, well, this is what I want. Take all the Muslims who are in the hellfire out of hellfire. That's the dua that I told you I wanted. And the beautiful thing, if you think about, is, when we think about the story of Rabi'a, we think about some of the other stories of Abu Dhar coming to the Prophet ﷺ when he was lying under the cover. The sleep is a beautiful thing. And I don't know about all of you, I've only been in my own self. But like, one of the beautiful things is like the time when you lay down when you're going to sleep. One thing I would be most curious about is like what people think about in that time. Because whatever you think about in that time, I know it must be something that's on your heart a lot. And whenever you think about that time, maybe it's something that you want to dream about. Like you're trying to put a dream in your mind or something. I don't know if anybody else does that. Sometimes I'll think of something right before I go to sleep because I want to put that dream in my mind. But definitely it's something, and I know for sure that if there's anybody that you really miss and anybody you really wish you could see, that you will think about in that time, right before you go to sleep. And so you're thinking about what's the most important to you. So I imagine the Prophet ﷺ, when Allah comes, if Allah came to one of us and said, you have one dua, what would it be? Would we be like Rabi'a at the beginning and say, like, give me some time to think, Ya Rasulullah, or Ya Allah? Or would we know right away, because there's already one dua that we make in every single sajda for the last 20 years or something. And we already know it, and we'd just be like, oh, the time finally came. I don't know. But the Prophet ﷺ, when Allah came to him, who was the Prophet ﷺ thinking about in that time? The Prophet ﷺ was thinking about us, the Muslims. And he wasn't thinking about the best of us. He was thinking about the ones that would be in the hellfire. He was thinking about the Muslims that would come after him that he didn't even know that would be put into the hellfire. And he was thinking that I have to do anything I can to get them out of that and to be with me in the hereafter. So the Prophet ﷺ, just like he was more hungry than Abu Hurairah, and just like he was seeking the barakah of the Muslims just as they were seeking the barakah of him, the Prophet ﷺ, we all long to be his companion in paradise, but he actually longed to have us as his companions in paradise as well. And this was a special dua he asked from Allah when he could ask for whatever he wanted to ask for. So that should be enough to make us feel special and to make us know what we can accomplish and to know what we can do through whatever hardship that we're facing. So inshallah ta'ala, we can stop here. There's like 3 of the biggest stories that I wanted to tell. I didn't get to tell, but inshallah you can pay attention when the book comes out. You can try to have that in your mind. And again, please share with me any other insights you have or any things I can add. Ameen ya Rabbil Alameen.